F.E.A.R is a franchise I hold very dear to my heart. Coming out in 2005, which actually in turn put me 8 at the time, was really my true first horror game I played, and I very specifically remember not getting too far into it. The very first jump scare of the game had me rattled in my seat so bad that I had to turn it off. So it would make sense that I wouldn't try to replay F.E.A.R again until much later. It actually took for me to watch my dad play through most of it for me to try again, and then that's when I fell in love with the game. Other than being a little bit older, I don't really know what changed on the second playthrough, but I was very easily able to put my head down and just move forward. And to this day, I don't think any other game I have played has done what F.E.A.R did so well. The combination of atmospheric horror and first-person shooter mechanics all go hand in hand in this game. It felt like the development team took their time and perfected their craft when it came to this entire game. The AI is incredible, the lighting is so incredibly ahead of its time, especially for 2005. The story even had me pulled in all the way through. Even though the franchise would go downhill from here and eventually hit rock bottom, yes, F.E.A.R 3, I am talking about you. This single game gained a following very quickly after release. The combination of paranormal events mixed with these high-intensity gunfights with the replicas were just jaw-dropping. F.E.A.R was a giant stepping stone for me in terms of where my interest in gaming would go. Well, let's just go ahead and dive into this nightmare together and explore F.E.A.R. So if you haven't seen my last nostalgic multiplayer retrospective, it covered BioShock 2. Another game I feel like doesn't really feel like it should have a multiplayer mode, but does. So I'm sort of on the lookout of these niche games where maybe the multiplayer wasn't the focus, but were unique and stood out. I'd love some community suggestions because even though I have a list of games I want to cover, it's not a very long list. On top of that, it's almost pure luck if I can get into consistent games online with some of these games. So drop them in the comments and I'll try them out if they pique my interest, and I'll be sure to shout you out and whatnot. Now back to some F.E.A.R. F.E.A.R is set in the not-so-distant future of 2025. We play as Point Man on his first mission, following and looking for a man named Paxton Fettel, who was seen murdering and eating whoever was trying to keep him captive. We learn about the replica at this point, a giant army led by Paxton through psychic abilities. We arrive at an abandoned factory hot on the tail of Paxton. Once getting to the roof, we get the first jump scare that actually pushed me away from playing this game. And it's really goofy because it's just Paxton hitting us with like a 2x4. After this, we are on to the next location where we think Paxton is hiding, and Point Man very quickly loses his entire group. The culprit of the entire group passing away is a little girl in a red dress. Point Man is on our way to our third location, the ArmaCam headquarters, where Paxton has been located once again, and hopefully this time we can actually catch him. As we go through this entire facility, you'll notice that the paranormal hallucinations are really well mixed in with this giant facility. Full-on hallucinations and also just moments where the little girl in the red dress will just walk by. Sometimes the latter is actually more scary. The more we see this girl, the more we realize she's part of the main story. Her name is Alma, and she was a subject to try to control the minds of armies psychopathically to create super soldiers. This leads to Alma being forced to have 2 babies to test mind control with. One of the babies was Paxton, of course. At the early age of 10, it was seen that Alma and Paxton could telepathically communicate to each other. This leads us to where we are now. We are under the assumption that Paxton is once again under the control of Alma. And we are sort of right. Paxton is actually in the facility to try to free Alma. Her location is actually just miles beneath the surface of the facility, where she is buried in a giant metal coffin. This leads to an abandoned area where Point Man is fighting not only Replica at this point, but also the ATC security guards who are trying to cover up this giant mess. We have one hallucination where we are killing Paxton, and that actually kills him in real life, but the biggest revelation of this hallucination is that we are Alma's other son. After all this, we are now tasked with destroying the entire facility. Some bombs go off, we are picked up by a helicopter and flown away. And as we are leaving, we get one last chilling visual of Alma.
That. We still don't know the extent of the damage.
We have
been able to get through to anyone since the explosion. What about Alma? What happened to her? What was that sound?
A lot of deep-rooted F.E.A.R story is actually told through these messages left behind by employees on phones and laptops. I'm going to be honest when I say that the first time I played this game, I didn't really pick up a lot on the story. There was a lot of behind-the-scenes work I had to do where I'd get online and read articles and whatnot, and honestly, it depends on what you're trying to get out of this experience, but you might have to do the same thing. But at its core, it's a simple revenge story where Alma and Paxton just want to get back at the corporation that ruined their lives. Add in some very great paranormal and horror aspects, and you have yourself a great game with some great scares along the way. Well, it's time to talk about the gameplay of F.E.A.R because it had to be good enough to pull us in and want more of it. Let's just start with the guns and say they are a blast to use. I just love how the entire environment reacts to gunshots. Walls will fall apart if you shoot them, lights will sway back and forth as you shoot them, and guns just genuinely feel like they have an impact in this game. From the pistol all the way to the special guns in this game, everything feels like it packs a punch. I also just love games that make shotguns feel powerful, and F.E.A.R does it perfectly. Past the standard guns, you have one of my favorite special weapons, the 10mm HV Penetrator. Basically, it's just a giant nail gun. This thing to me is a work of art without a doubt. Other than that, the basic guns just feel great. The SMG assault rifle handle like you would imagine while feeling great. You even have bullet time and some cool kicks to use. Let's talk about the star of the show when it comes to talking about F.E.A.R, the AI. The replica corresponds to your actions. You shoot around them, they are now alerted. You kill a few of them, another soldier might call for backup, and this leads to some slow building interactions. What I mean by this is that sometimes you'll take a slower approach to try to find everyone in the room before you just go guns a-blazing. With that being said though, there are also moments in this game where they just throw replica at you left and right. And this is great because it mixes up the pace while also keeping you on your toes. You could have your back against the wall fighting multiple replicas and a few elite soldiers on top of that. Or you could be crouching around a large open area trying to spot out all the replica before you make your first move. Alright, that's everything I have to cover with the single player aspect of F.E.A.R. Well, let's go ahead and just move on to the multiplayer aspect that everyone's here for. The way I'm going to review F.E.A.R's multiplayer is what it looked like at launch and what it looks like today. On release, F.E.A.R Combat was a mixed bag. F.E.A.R Combat was the name given to the multiplayer component of F.E.A.R, and it was released for free in 2006. The official F.E.A.R Combat is gone, but we'll get a little bit more into that later. The maps carry the essence of what made the single player great. Walking around these maps by yourself, sometimes you'll just hear noises in the backgrounds, maybe Alma laughing or just some sobbing noises. And it's genuinely unsettling that you're just playing a multiplayer map and there's these weird background noises. With full lobbies and lots of gunshots going on, it'd be hard to notice these things, but this is something I picked up on while just walking around. The maps on top of that would often be dimly lit, giving off a haunting type of feel. F.E.A.R would release with 12 maps on launch, and consoles would even get 6 more of their own exclusives. F.E.A.R multiplayer would offer 5 game modes on release: Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, Elimination, Team Elimination, and Capture the Flag. Later added would also be Slow-Mo Deathmatch, Slow-Mo Team Deathmatch, Control, and Conquer All. The slow modes add a pickup which, if held long enough, will let the player use a bullet time for a limited amount of time. The game mode is fun and offers a great way to slow down the pace of any multiplayer match. Most of these game modes are what you'd expect. The eliminations, you have 1 life, Capture the Flag, obviously Capture the Flag. The 2 that seem to stand out are Control and Conquer All, the 2 that were added after the fact. Conquer All just seems to be like Conquest from Battlefield, but at a much smaller scale. There are 5 points that need to be captured. Each objective that you own earns points. The map I looked at was pretty small, and being out in the open in the F.E.A.R engine just felt so wrong. With that being said, even though the map looks awful, I could imagine that it would play pretty fun. There's a wide array of guns in the F.E.A.R game, and having a big open map like this would actually offer different gameplay styles to run with. Next is Control, which is basically just like domination from Call of Duty. There are 3 objective points, and holding the objective earns you points as the game progresses. Now that we've talked about all the game modes, let's see what it's like to boot into your first game of F.E.A.R Online. After loading the map, the player gets to select from a list of guns: dual pistols, SMG, shotgun, assault rifle, 10mm HV penetrator, and ASP rifle. It's a great mix of guns, offering a wide variety in playstyle, and on top of that, melee only is also an option. You are now dropped into F.E.A.R combat, and depending on which game mode you're playing, will have an objective. The first thing I noticed was how dimly lit and dark most of the levels were, as they mostly take place at night. With that being said, I normally really don't like night maps, but the well lighting in the F.E.A.R engine really makes these things not only playable but enjoyable. The one thing I noticed about the few maps that I did play on is they sort of followed this sort of recipe, as you'd have 2 areas that were pretty close quarter and then a giant open middle area that would allow for some more open gunfights. Now let's actually talk about some of the gunfights in this game. Gunfights are 100% what steal the show in this game, and if anything are going to be the thing that pull you in for a long time. Whether you're in a 1v1, 2v2, or have the odds against you, everything is so fast paced. Any situation feels winnable or losable due to one mistake. In an instance, one corner can catch you off guard and you are now in an intense gunfight. Playing single player had me expecting more of a slower or mid-paced type of game, but F.E.A.R actually feels more like an arcade style Quake or something like that more than it does like a realistic Call of Duty. There's armor and health that you get to pick up, and on top of that there are even special weapons like the particle weapon from the story that are also pickups throughout the levels. The maps overall are a great time. Specifically, Campus and Waterworks are some of my favorites. The biggest drawback are the spawns. If you're lucky, you'll get a decent spawn and you won't be hurt after spawning in. But I have had spawns where I spawned into grenades, spawned into gunfights that were already going on, and I've actually spawned in the enemy's bases before. I have no idea what's going on during these spawns, but it feels like whenever I was brought into a bad cycle of bad spawns, I was pretty much fucked for just a few minutes. But once you're able to break that cycle, you're right back into the action. With quick kill times, fast movement, and some over-the-top interactions, F.E.A.R combat is an incredibly unique experience. If you enjoyed F.E.A.R single player at all, it was probably more likely due to the interactions with the replica and the gunplay. I without a doubt would suggest this is someone who actually enjoyed the F.E.A.R single player, but on top of that, anyone who just likes very fast-paced multiplayer shooters. After messing around with the controls because they are a bit goofy and you get yourself comfortable, this is a really incredibly fun time. Alright, but now we're in 2022, so what's it like playing F.E.A.R online now? First and foremost, if you own F.E.A.R on Steam, you do not own F.E.A.R Combat. Due to some licensing issues, F.E.A.R Combat is not on Steam. There is, however, a third-party website that has a download link to play F.E.A.R Combat in present day. If I'm not dumb, it will be linked in the description. It's completely free and worth the time if you're any bit interested. Now, downloading this will put you into an incredibly buggy mess that won't run without dropping frames for more than 2 minutes. I honestly just assumed, since it was a fan-made product, that it had some very bad issues, and for some reason with my build it just wasn't gonna work. That was until I realized I was just being stupid and missed the giant download and patch file area, which I just needed to download the current patch. And ever since then, I haven't had any issues running F.E.A.R Combat. Okay, but what's it like getting into a server? Well, realistically, you're only going to be lucky to find 1 to 2 servers with people on them at any given time. Normally there'll be about 8 to 10 people on a server at a time, which is more than enough to have an enjoyable experience. What wasn't fun was running into a map that had a lot of community made maps in queue and community made textures. Now I guess the textures weren't all that bad, small stuff like adding camos to guns or making player models easier to tell apart. Where I really ran into issues though were maps that really just don't belong in F.E.A.R. F.E.A.R's maps thrive off the close quarter battles and the atmosphere that it provides, as it feels so similar to the single player experience. Now I know there's some sort of saying where if a community has the ability to make maps, Dust 2 will find its way in there somehow in some way. So playing Dust 2 in F.E.A.R just about broke me. And trust me, I am all for community made maps and textures, because I know that's what normally will thrive a community to last longer, is if they are able to make stuff and add it into the game themselves. But I don't think I ever found such a mismatched opportunity as Dust 2 in the F.E.A.R engine. The F.E.A.R engine really thrives off dark and dimly lit areas, while Dust 2 is so bright and just so not F.E.A.R-esque, it just ruins it. Well, obviously if this happens to you, you can just leave and come back in a few hours, crossing your fingers it's back to a normal map. And really, with this all being said, this only really happened to me once, and past some different textures, the whole F.E.A.R combat experience has been pretty vanilla for me. And hey, that's what I want. This is mostly a nostalgia trip for me. I don't want something new in a game that I just want to play the old multiplayer for. I am coming back to this multiplayer game in 2006, not for new content, but for the experiences I remember having. This multiplayer mode stands on its own. It has a small but dedicated fan base still playing it from time to time to this day for a reason. It's over-the-top bullet time mixed with a variety of guns and maps that fit the atmosphere of the single player. The multiplayer is a great cherry on top of an already great game. I'm glad I was able to find this vanilla experience that I really enjoyed growing up. I never was there for the peak of the F.E.A.R online experience, but from what I remember playing, I had a really memorable and fun time with it. So being able to re-experience is now also a blast for me. And from what I remember, they made a multi-experience for F.E.A.R 2 and 3, so maybe I'll have to check those out sometime too. At its core, F.E.A.R Combat, the community-made project, has brought back the vanilla F.E.A.R experience I was looking for, and I am extremely grateful for that. When you have these weird community-made projects, it's so crazy to think that people have taken time out of their day to bring us an experience that really shouldn't be able to be experienced in today's date. So truly, my hat goes off to the people who brought F.E.A.R Combat back, because without them I wouldn't be able to make this video either way, and I just would have to remember F.E.A.R multiplayer as it was back in the day. But either way, that's going to do it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this second retrospective on a multiplayer experience that really shouldn't have existed in the first place. I said it once and I'll say it again: if you have another old school multiplayer experience that really seem to be forgotten about, let me know. I would love to cover it. This is a really fun thing for me to do. I made a tweet back in like February talking about how much I miss these unique online experiences, and I was like, why don't I just cover it? I'm like, that's fun. And already it's been a blast, you know, trying to find servers at like 3 a.m. and trying to download these weird community made things. And Bioshock 2 was really easy, but F.E.A.R created a very short and easy obstacle to overcome, but it was still there. On top of that, there's been like 3 or 4 other games I've been trying to get into servers with that I've had just absolutely no luck. F.E.A.R, luckily enough, I was able to get, so here's the F.E.A.R video. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did. Subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this, because I'm working on other stuff in the background. I really appreciate you guys watching this video, and I'll see you next time.